from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up today on Ag Day, industry leaders from the nation's grain sector convene in California. We have team coverage from the 2018 Commodity Classic.
Kicking off our coverage from Commodity Classic, we're at the Bayer Advocacy Forum, where there's still work to do between farmers and consumers.
And consumers may be on the mind of some farmers, but it's China on the minds of National Sorghum Producers Association. We'll have that story on Ag Day.
In analysis, find out why it's not all doom and gloom in the dairy industry.
Yeah, everyone's bearish. Everyone sees lots of supply, no hope.
Plus, as winter winds down, maple syrup season steams up.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Clinton is on assignment at Commodity Classic. We'll hear from him in a few minutes. As Commodity Classic gets underway today in Anaheim, California, there's no shortage of topics that are concerning to the major grain groups that will conduct their annual meetings here. Whether it's corn, soy, wheat, or sorghum, all four are worried about possible changes to trade deals, especially the North American Free Trade Agreement. The 7th round of NAFTA talks, coincidentally, has now begun in Mexico. Discussions about trade inevitably turned to China. 3 weeks ago, the country announced it was launching an anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigation into the U.S. sorghum industry. China claims the U.S. is unloading sorghum at unfairly low prices. China's move came just days after President Trump slapped steep tariffs on solar panels and washing machines from China. Tyne Morgan begins our coverage of Commodity Classic with a look at this investigation. Tyne?
Thanks so much, Betsy. Here now with Tim Lust from National Sorghum Producers. And recently we've been covering this issue in China, with China launching an anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigation into U.S. sorghum. Tim, I know this is what you've been doing for the past few weeks, is looking at this issue. But I have to ask you, first off, is the U.S. illegally dumping sorghum into China?
No, we're not. We're not dumping. We have a long-standing relationship with our Chinese customers. It's been a win-win situation. Certainly on the subsidy, we are not illegally subsidizing our farmers. The United States has a long-standing tradition of withholding, following the WTO process of what's legal there. So we do not believe we are in any form or fashion.
You know, when this first hit the news, I know National Sorghum Producers came out and you said you expected this to take about a year, this investigation to take about a year. Is that still the case? Well,
certainly when you look at historical cases, you know, anywhere from 6 to 8 months to a year, the government has up to a year to finalize this process. It's very hard to predict just how fast this process is going to go. We've just been through the first phase, which is a 20-day period where we had to register not only National Sorghum Producers, but many of our state organizations and the grain trade. So we know that process is complete. We're now moving into phase 2, which is a questionnaire type process where it's a back and forth exchange in terms of information. So that's the next phase. That's about a 37-day process, and we're moving forward into that process now.
Yeah, so that moved pretty quickly. But when originally this story hit, you know, I know it had an impact on sorghum prices, but how have exports held up?
Actually, exports have been very strong the last few weeks. Last week we shipped combined business almost 12 million bushels, and so both loadings as well as sales have continued to be strong. China obviously continuing to drive that, but countries like Japan moving in last week also with some purchases.
Yeah, and of course China is the #1 buyer of U.S. sorghum. Tim was also talking about acreage. You know, we still don't know exactly what acreage is going to be in the U.S., but the dry weather in Texas and some areas of the plains could play into sorghum's favor this year. So we'll keep an eye on that. Reporting from Commodity Classic in Anaheim, California, I'm Tyne Morgan.
Thanks, Tyne. Tyne says Japan just started importing U.S. sorghum last week. Now, before the start of Commodity Classic, Bayer conducts a forum to look at a long list of issues facing the ag sector. Clinton joins us now with that part of the story. Clinton?
That's right, Betsy. For 13 years now, Bayer has held its Advocacy Forum as a lead-in to Commodity Classic. Now, the goal is finding common ground, finding a way to stimulate the conversation between farmers, the food industry, and consumers. This year, Bayer rolling out the results of a recent survey of consumers, hoping to identify the conflicts and agreements between modern agriculture and its customers. It found that while 95% of people believe advancements will help grow more food, less than half actually support developing new plants that produce a higher yield and more food than current varieties. Advocates say American farmers still aren't getting through.
I think we're not in a very good place, to be brutally honest. We preach to the choir for us that are in ag, and we all know what we do, and we're passionate about it, and we love it because we're growing crops to provide healthy, safe, affordable food to everyone. But outside of our scope, outside of our audience, the general public, the consumers, they're really afraid of the technologies that growers use to grow these crops. We've got to do a better job as an industry, all of us.
The work continues, and our work continues here at Commodity Classic in Anaheim, California. We'll be here all week covering the event and hoping to get some insights for 2018. Betsy.
Thanks, Clinton. One issue facing corn and soybean growers is the renewable fuel standard. Later today, members of the Trump cabinet are meeting with key lawmakers who are split on the significance of the RFS. Texas Senator Ted Cruz has been vocal in his opposition to RFS. Cruz spoke at a bankrupt oil refinery last week in Philadelphia, which blames its financial woes on the RFS. Senator Cruz calls the use of RINs a broken system. Meanwhile, Iowa Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst have been very outspoken in their support of biofuels. Numerous farm groups sent a letter to President Trump in advance of the meeting, asking him to avoid seeking changes that would weaken the nation's biofuel policy. Trade uncertainty is causing corn buyers from Mexico to continue to look elsewhere for supplies. According to Ag Trader Talk, Mexico purchased 583,000 tons of Brazilian corn last year. That's nearly a 1,000% increase over 2016. All of the corn imports occurred during the last 4 months of 2017. Virtually no Brazilian corn was imported to Mexico prior to 2017. Mike Hoffman staying behind in the studio with me and has a look at today's crop comments. Mike?
Good morning, Betsy. Matt Nelson in Burt County, Nebraska, sending us this picture of the first calf of the season. According to the U.S. Drought Monitor, 30% of the state is abnormally dry. Nearly 70% is drought-free, though. And it's the dead of winter in Soros, North Dakota. This was taken from Joe's office window. Highs are in the upper 30s and lingering some days into the lower 30s this week. And taking a look at the wind speed forecast, you can see a little bit on the windy side, Great Lakes into the Central Plains this morning. As we head through the afternoon, that increases a little bit, and it also increases in the southwest, other parts of the Rockies. Heading into the day tomorrow, most of the wind is going to be a little farther south in the Tennessee Valley and the southwestern portions of the country, as well as Montana back into the Pacific Northwest. We'll have the rest of your forecast coming up in a few minutes, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Save time each day and receive the latest market prices directly to your cell phone with market updates. It makes it effortless to stay aware of shifting market prices. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
Next in analysis, we'll see why it's not all doom and gloom in the dairy sector. And when you think of real maple syrup, you probably envision Canada or Northeast United States. But some folks in the bluegrass state say they can make a tasty syrup too.
Uh-oh.
Before Clinton headed west to Anaheim, he talked with one analyst about the dairy sector who says things may not be as bad as it seems.
Here at the Agribusiness Desk today, we have Sean Hackett, Hackett Financial Advisors. Sean, let's get into the dairy market, because if we look out at 2018, nobody's really expecting a whole lot. In fact, you almost might say they're expecting another down year. What do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, everyone's bearish. Everyone sees lots of supply, no hope. Very similar to grain markets a month or two ago, and now we're seeing prices rise. But what we see is the 2013-14 bull market was driven by milk powder demand from China.
Sure.
Due to the melamine scandal.
Right.
However, we've been monitoring Chinese milk powder production. It's been down 4 years in a row and was down 21% in the month of December, which is their #1 producing month of the year. They are in big trouble with their supplies. I'm going to have to buy record amounts of milk powder in the upcoming season. At the same time, the largest exporter of milk powder derivatives in the world, which is New Zealand, has had a second terrible production season in a row due to bad weather. We see this combination coming together, creating a whipsaw effect for milk powder prices and stimulating the overall milk price is much higher. We think the market is gotten into a complacency that it ought not to be in, and we're actually pretty optimistic that this is a big year for an improvement in milk prices.
So you don't think we have too many global supplies of milk? You don't think we're oversupplied?
Well, we have been oversupplied.
Okay.
You know, we had too much milk powder. We have, at least in the U.S., too much cheese. But that's last year.
Yes.
Looking forward to this year, we see the balance tipping the scales clearly on the side of demand overtaking the supply, and those supplies whittling down. We always talk about stocks to usage. We see those stock to usage ratios falling very rapidly, and if we see the kind of buying that we saw in 2013 from China, like we think we're going to see, there's just not that. Apparent oversupply will not be enough.
Okay, so there's some good things to watch. If you're a dairy farmer, what's your strategy?
Sell as little as you possibly can right now. Don't oversell. Sell what you have to, but be patient. We think you're going to get great selling opportunities later on in the year.
All right, well, we appreciate the sage advice. Thank you so much. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
For more marketing information on everything from grains to livestock to cotton and sugar, call Sean with Hackett Financial Advisors at 561-573-3766. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Welcome back to Ag Day with meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, when you look at the weather map behind us, there's a lot going on. So if you could explain, everything we're seeing a little bit.
There are. Not every front's a big front or a strong front, but there's just a lot of things going on across the country, coast to coast. Some days there's only 1 or 2 fronts on the entire weather map, but today that's not the case. You can see multiple cold fronts, especially as we put the maps into motion. Big high pressure over the East Coast and Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, providing you folks with some fantastic weather for late in the month of February. In fact, we're heading toward the last couple of days here of February, but you can see there's going to be some moisture in the southern plain states moving into the southern Mississippi Valley with this pretty strong storm system moving through that area. We have a decent one moving through the southwest. It won't produce heavy amounts of precipitation, but a little bit of snow, mainly higher elevations. And then that's a strong storm coming into the Pacific Northwest as we head through the day tomorrow, especially into the afternoon. And you can see by afternoon tomorrow, we're looking at a lot of rain through the Tennessee Valley, many parts of the southeast, areas that don't necessarily need it anymore. A few weeks ago, we were getting dry, but not anymore. It's been pretty wet in those areas. Taking a look at precipitation estimates over the past 24 hours, we've had a little bit in the far southeast, a little bit in the west, but we're going to add a fair amount over the next 36 hours. You can see a lot of that northern portions of Louisiana, southern Arkansas, and other portions of Mississippi and Alabama, and we'll just be getting into that storm system in the Pacific Northwest. There'll be more and more moisture with that as it comes inland. Most of the snow going to be either up in Canada or in the higher elevations out west, adding in the next 36 hours. You can see where we will add a little bit in northern portions of New England. We're going to add some well down into the Four Corner region, even southward from there, pretty far south for this time of the year. High temperatures today, very pleasant 70s along the Gulf Coast. Regular, kind of normal temperatures in the 30s in the northern plains. Lows tonight, they're going to drop off into the teens, northern Rockies, northern plains, but still 50s and 60s in the southern Mississippi Valley toward the Gulf Coast. And we're looking at some 80-degree readings, Florida over toward Texas tomorrow afternoon, 20s and 30s in the northern plains. Big trough in the southwest, kind of cutting off for a while, but then it folds into the rest of the jet stream. You can see these are some slow-moving, cut-off lows moving from west to east across the country, and one will be over the Great Lakes by the early part of next week. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We head to Everett, Washington. First of all, cloudy and chilly, light rain at times, high of 44 degrees. El Reno, Oklahoma, mostly cloudy. Afternoon showers are possible, high of 56. And lots of sunshine for Saginaw, Michigan today, rather warm, high around 54 degrees.
Up next, the latest news from the dairy sector. And farmers in a state better known for tobacco than just about any crop say there's a growing maple syrup industry. Details when we head in the country. USDA setting its expectations for the dairy industry this year, with Ag Department economists forecasting milk production to be record high. Chief Ag economist Robert Johansson expecting milk production to reach 218.7 billion pounds, an increase of 1.5% from 215.4 billion pounds last year. When it comes to milk prices, Johansson anticipating a 9% decrease in price to just over $16 versus $17 per hundred last year. USDA releasing its cold storage report for January. The report showing natural cheese stocks in warehouses are down slightly from the previous month, but up 7% from a year ago. Butter stocks up double digits to 33% from last month, and an increase of 1% from a year ago at this time. Some analysts say even though 33% seems like a large number, overall U.S. butter supplies seem normal.
Last year they were below normal, so we're going from below normal to normal. They're not really burdensome, so we really don't think there's a lot more pressure on butter. We think butter demand is now starting to kick in again based upon the lower prices, and we actually see the market being fairly constructive in butter for the rest of the year.
According to Bloomberg, USDA says demand for butter, cream, and butter fat is increasing. That's due to consumer misconceptions debunked by studies showing lower health risks from dairy fat and trans fats. As winter starts to wind down, maple trees start to flow, and that means syrup season. Next, see how that business is starting to catch on in the bluegrass state.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
When thinking of maple syrup, many may not consider the bluegrass state, but there is a growing group of producers in Kentucky tapping into the market and creating gooey maple syrup out of the sap. The University of Kentucky reports on one family's new niche.
Actually, the reason we called it Southdown Farm, this area here, there was a post office here. This is the first year that we had the sugar house built. We got it through a KSU Small Farmers Grant.
We have 50 acres here, and I'm probably utilizing maybe about 20 acres of it right now. There's so little time, so many trees. We have 200 taps out this year, and I would say that's probably about 170 trees, because some trees you can tap more than one time.
It's one of the reasons we're so excited about the possibilities for maple syrup in this area, because we've got the mountains, we've got the trees, and it creates a natural vacuum. So you don't have as much initial startup cost as you might if you had to get a vacuum system and all that.
Look around, people will say, that's hillside property, it's worthless, there's nothing here, you know, $500 an acre. But there's maple trees all over these hills, and we can tap into an untapped resource. If you think about the hundreds of gallons of sap collected and it all comes out like this, you know, I mean, it just amazes me how much you can collect.
This season so far has been huge and awesome. For here in this area, we've had below the 32 and above, more like around 40. We've had that back and forth happening every week. Last 2-3 weeks, we've been running it almost daily.
Even in the midst of a property that's been strip mined, there's redeemable factors when we think about maple.
Well, maple syrup is sweet, delicious. It makes anything better. You know, we have this resource. Well, that's one thing that Letcher County has is trees. You know, this doesn't take the tree down, so it's not there anymore. There's more requests than we can fill at this point, so we're...
That's a nice problem, isn't it?
It sure is. It takes work to cook it down and to get everything set up, but there's a lot of people that are interested in the product. You know, you don't have to worry about trying to sell this product. If you make it and you make it well, people want it.
I take the opinion that there's no silver bullets out there. There's not one next thing that's going to save Appalachia, but I call maple syrup a silver BB. Just one of the things that could have an impact on agriculture in the state and Eastern Kentucky. When we think of ag, we get forgotten sometimes, don't we? I mean, we think of ag and forestry, and this is a forest ag product. It's just right for us.
A group of maple syrup producers came together last year to form the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association. They hope the industry can grow in the state. Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're glad you tuned in. For Mike Hoffman, Clinton Griffiths, and Tyne Morgan, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Have a great day.
Ag Day, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest lasting heavy duty pickups.